Isaiah Z. Jackson woke up on his wedding day with a confidence that mirrored his orderly life. Everything had been planned meticulously, from the sleek black tux he wore to the precise timing of the vows. Z was a man of method, and his life up to this point reflected that. A thriving software engineering career, a close circle of trusted friends, and now, the woman of his dreams. Imani was the embodiment of his ideal partner, intelligent, poised, and dazzling. She wasn't just beautiful, she carried herself with an effortless grace that made people stop and take notice. From the moment they met, Z knew she was the one. Their whirlwind romance swept through candlelit dinners, weekend getaways, and inside jokes that felt like theirs alone. The culmination was a wedding straight out of a fairy tale, with hundreds of well-wishers marveling at their happiness. But perfection, as they say, is often an illusion. As the newlyweds returned to their modern, luxurious loft, they carried with them the warmth of celebration. The atmosphere of their home was steeped in chic minimalism, reflecting Z's success and methodical tastes. He poured himself a glass of bourbon, letting its warmth settle his exhilaration, as Imani excused herself to freshen up. When she returned, Z noticed something off immediately. Her normally serene expression was tight, her movements hesitant. He set down his drink and crossed the room toward her. "Are you okay?" His voice, usually calm, carried a note of concern. Imani's hands trembled as she clasped them tightly in front of her. "There's something I need to tell you," she said. The words that followed shifted Z's world off its axis. Imani revealed a part of herself that she had kept hidden, something deeply personal, a part of her identity she had never fully shared. The room, once filled with the afterglow of their wedding, now felt oppressive. The walls seemed to close in as Z tried to make sense of her confession. "You mean to tell me, on our wedding day?" His voice cracked, disbelief laced with anger. Imani reached for him, tears streaming. "I didn't want to lose you. I thought I could tell you after we got through the wedding." But Z's trust, the foundation of their relationship, had been obliterated. His anger simmered to the surface, but before he could respond, a frantic knock at the door shattered the moment. It was Marcus, his oldest friend and a man Z had trusted with his life. Marcus's face was ashen, his breath shallow. "Tobias," he gasped. "Something's happened. You've got to come with me." Tobias was the steady, kind anchor in their friend group. For Tobias to be in trouble, Z knew it had to be serious. Without hesitation, he grabbed his keys, leaving Imani standing in the silence of their shattered evening. The drive to Tobias's house was heavy with tension. The quiet residential street stood in stark contrast to Z's racing mind. When they reached the house, it was dark and eerily still. Marcus knocked once, then twice, harder each time. "Something's not right," Z muttered, his heart pounding. When no one answered, Z tried the handle. The door swung open, its creak splitting the quiet night. The house smelled faintly of Tobias's cologne, but there was no sign of him. Room by room, they searched, calling his name. It wasn't until they reached the bedroom that they found him. Tobias lay sprawled on the floor, his body cold, blood pooling around his head. Z's knees buckled as the sight burned into his memory. His friend, his brother, was gone. Marcus stood frozen, his face a mask of horror. Who would do this?" he stammered. The scene was surreal. There was no sign of a break-in, no overturned furniture to suggest a struggle. It became clear, Tobias had let his killer in. Detectives arrived, their questions probing but professional. Z and Marcus explained their discovery, their words strained by shock. Z knew better than to expect quick answers. Growing up, he'd seen his share of investigations drag on with no closure. That night, as he returned to the loft, Z felt hollow. Imani was waiting, her eyes red and swollen from crying. "What happened?" she asked softly. Z's response was cold, distant. Tobias is dead. The air between them grew heavier. Imani's earlier revelation lingered, unresolved. Z couldn't shake the sense that everything, the murder, her secret, was connected. Days passed in a blur of grief and unanswered questions. Then, Detective Williams called Z back to the station. "We found something in Tobias's belongings," Williams said, leading Z to an evidence table. On it were letters, each addressed to Tobias, signed by someone named Darnell RHS. Z frowned. "Who's Darnell?" Williams explained. "Darnell served time for a robbery in your old neighborhood. He got out 6 months ago. These letters, they're threatening. Looks like Tobias owed him something." The words chilled Z. "You owe me. I'm coming to collect." Z tracked Darnell down to a rundown apartment complex. When the door opened, the man who stood before him radiated bitterness. "I want to know about Tobias," Z demanded. Darnell's lip curled. "Tobias? You mean the guy who left me to rot in prison? That Tobias?" The story spilled out. Years ago, Tobias had been involved in a robbery gone wrong. When things got messy, he let Darnell take the fall. Now free, Darnell wanted restitution. "I didn't kill him," Darnell said. "But I warned him. Told him his past would catch up with him." The revelation shook Z. Tobias, the moral compass of their group, wasn't as innocent as he seemed. Then came Marcus's call. "Meet me at the old warehouse. We need to talk." The location was a relic of their youth, a place of shared memories. But when Z arrived, it was Imani who appeared from the shadows. "I used Marcus's phone to call you," she admitted. "There's more you need to know." Before she could explain, Marcus arrived. His face was grim, his voice heavy with guilt. "I killed Tobias," he said. Z's world collapsed as Marcus confessed. Tobias had threatened to expose Imani's past relationship with him, driven by jealousy. Marcus, in a misguided attempt to protect Z, had confronted Tobias, and the confrontation had turned fatal. "Everything I did was for you," Marcus said. But Z saw only betrayal. The man he trusted most had taken his oldest friend's life. The tension erupted into violence. Marcus lunged at Z, their fight brutal and desperate. Z's vision blurred as Marcus's hands tightened around his throat. Then came the crack of metal against bone. Imani, trembling and pale, stood with a pipe in her hands. Marcus fell unconscious to the floor. The police arrived, taking Marcus into custody. As the sun rose over the city, Z stood on the brink of an unrecognizable future. Tobias was gone. Marcus had betrayed him. Imani's lies had unraveled their marriage. As Z walked away from the warehouse, he carried the weight of shattered trust and irreparable loss. Some truths, he realized, come at a cost too great to bear.